1996, soon after Prabhu's judgment, there was a case of Abhiram Singh versus Umachen, which was a Santa Cruz Assembly constituency. Once again, the Bombay High Court set aside his judgment. Came before 3 judges. After Prabhu's judgment, the 3 judges thought that the interpretation of 123.3 by Prabhu was a difficult thing to swallow because it was a question of his religion. It's too complex, but so they referred it to 5 judges. It reached before 5 judges 8 years later, who then referred it to 7 judges. The 7 judges heard it in 2017, and they said that any use of religion in politics was sickening. They also overruled Prabhu on the point of his religion and said any appeal to religion was bad. But when it came to crunch time, and they said, will you not review the Hindutva judgments? They said, where does the reference order ask us to do that? There's not a word in the reference order about Hindutva. So while laying down about 50 pages of how important secularism is, they refuse to go into the one judgment which undermines secularism in India. And there you have it, gentlemen. We have, everyone believes in the Constitution. But the Constitution is what you say it is. It's like Alice in Wonderland. The BJP's oath requires every member to swear an oath on secularism and the Constitution of India. But that is because they believe, and they say they are vindicated by the Hindutva judgments, that Hindutva is secular. Therefore there is no obvious breach. So the court backs down. Parliament and the executive are today in control of forces who believe strongly in the Hindutva agenda. Now, in this situation, it is my view that the constitutional guarantees of equal treatment to all religions are today hollowed out, and they stand seriously compromised. The BJP, being the government of the centre, with an absolute majority in parliament, sees no need to alter the de jure status. Because being in control of the state and its instrumentalities, it is able to achieve its goal of a cultural, religious state without amending the Constitution. In fact, an amendment of the Constitution would affect India's de jure status in the world. So we have a Constitution which talks in the preamble of secularism, and we have a polity which talks of a ethnocracy which is based on religious and cultural rights. It's been a long talk. I hope it's not taken too much of your time, but it taught me a lot while I was reading. In fact, I digress only to say this, that some of this is cut and dry, but when you read the life stories of Veer Savarkar, you realize how complex a man he was. He was an atheist. He thought this whole concept of cow slaughter had made Hindus docile as bovine creatures. In fact, he had extreme views. He was pro-Muslim till he was put in the Andaman jails. When he was badly treated by Muslim jailers there, he changed his view. He could not get along with the RSS. I say this only because these are not cut and dried stories. And these are people who I disagree with, but they were men of great conviction. And they strongly believed in what they believed. Unfortunately for us, their beliefs go contrary to the civic constitution of India. And there you have it, my friends. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for a deeply informative and thought-provoking presentation. I'm sure the lecture has raised several questions in everybody's minds. We propose now to have a moderated discussion on the subject matter of the lecture led by our colleague, Advocate Cleophas Coutinho. Sir, may I request you to take a seat on the stage. For all of you out there who have questions Yeah. Harish over there has slips of paper. Any questions you may have, you may write them out on those slips of paper and pass them up to us over here. Mr. Coutinho will then moderate the questions and put them to our guest speaker.
So now, what has happened is, even on the uniform civil code, there are a number of judgments that a number of them say that there has to be a uniform civil code. But the Law Commission of India has very clearly said no.
See, the problem in all this is what is uniform. Is yours uniform or is mine uniform? Now, I believe me, when you look at how constitution, I'm sorry, am I audible? I hope.
Yes.
When you look at how constitutions were framed all over the world, contentious issues were always deferred to an aspirational part of the constitution. Matters which you could not resolve at the heightened tensions of that moment were put in aspirational parts. Our part 4 is an aspirational part. It was hoped that when tempers of partition cooled, when education and economic prosperity increased, then people would be able to have a rational discourse to bring this about. But it is not worked that way. In fact, polarization is more heightened today than it was in those days. And in a polarized atmosphere, it is very difficult to get the trust of communities. And what would otherwise be benign or might be possible is looked at with great suspicion.
So could it be that its time has not come?
The problem is the time of secularism is gone. It's not that the time of the UCC has not come. That we are looking at a far more fundamental problem. And if that can't be resolved, then you may have all the uniform codes you want. But they are never going to be neutral codes.
You have one more question on the right.
I must say one thing, that while I critique Hindu fundamentalism, I think it is a darn sight more palatable than Muslim fundamentalism. So don't get me wrong on that. I would much prefer to live in a Hindu fundamentalist state than a Muslim fundamentalist state. But I would prefer not to live in a fundamentalist state. Let me put it correctly.
So one question on minority rights. Has it caused any problem?
Of course, because since the 1990s, the narrative has been that minority rights is appeasement. And that is allowed. You see, I will digress for a few minutes. Hinduism essentially was heterogeneous. It has never been a cohesive political force. Savarkar saw it in the 30s. He said that if we do not unite on a few religious principles and a few cultural beliefs, we will never be a political force. The attempt has been to consolidate a Hindu vote, just as attempts have been made in the past to use a Muslim vote. And the concept of minority rights has been used as a whipping boy to talk of the necessity of Hindu consolidation.
Yeah.
These are dangerous and difficult topics. I broach it with some consternation, but we are lawyers and we can deal with topics which I would not do in a public gathering.
Yes. Now one more like this. Secularism, why is it considered to be a positive?
Secularism in India was sarva dharma. It treat all religions equally. It was not the separation of church and state. Amount of money spent on the Hajj by the government, amount of money spent on the Kumbh Mela. So long as there was a broad equidistance, secularism meant equal treatment. The secularization is a completely different concept. India never believed in secularization. India believed in secularism meaning equal treatment, and the constitution based not on religion but on birth and domicile. That is, you see, when you say is that good or bad, that goes to a value system. If you are a fundamentalist and you believe that a religious cultural state is a strong state, you might say that that is the right way to be and we don't need a secular state. That's a point of view. It's a point of debate. I believe very much that a plural society like India, which is so heterogeneous, requires its diversity to be respected. But there are various views on that. People like Savarkar strongly believe that there could be no viable nation unless it was grounded in religion and culture. These are views.
This looks very political. How do you see the jury Hindutva for the next 10 years?
I don't know. It's difficult to say whether we'll ever have amendments removing the word secular or changing it. But I don't think government needs to. You see, everything that you want to do can be done while keeping the de jure going. That is the strange part of Indian constitutional history. The words are there, but as Alice said in Wonderland, a word means what I say it means.
Now, what is your solution to protect secular? That is the last one.
I don't have a solution. I only have faith and hope that in the strength of India, somewhere I remember, I do believe that India gets its secular feelings because the Hindu is secular, by and large. All these years, all these communities, including Parsis, came into this country, settled down, they were never harassed, they were allowed to live their lives in peace. India got its strength from its lack of homogeneity and from its willingness to live and let live. It is the political class which has changed that. In the last 10 years, passions have been whipped up, which has changed the view many Hindus look on us. And they feel they are getting shortchanged in their own country. And that creates this political mobilization. This is a very difficult thing. Don't forget that the BJP had 2 seats in 1984. And it did not have any seat in the Constituent Assembly. But they worked hard to be where they are. If we need to counter that, someone will have to work as hard. It's not going to be short term, it's not going to be easy, and it might not even happen. But then I don't see any short term solutions to this.
Last one. Your views on the Sabrimala journey.
And I've not studied it. But I believe it falls in the same genre. Everyone wants to say that my faith allows me to do something which the law might not otherwise think is good or bad. Everyone does it. And it's, as I say, it's competitive communalism at its worst. And each time it weakens the state. It weakens the fiber of the state and it weakens the basis of the state. And everyone does it. Today, tell me someone who's not a soft Hindutva in politics. Everyone is doing it. Because every politician wants power. And power requires a load which you can live by and go by. If Mr. Kejriwal recites the Chalisa, if Rajiv Gandhi says the Janu temple going man, if the lady in Calcutta also mentioned, it's because the mood of the country has swung to a level where it's very difficult to contest an election if you say you do not have religious affiliations. It's sad, but it's true. My belief today in giving this speech is that we tend to say that if we don't talk of it, it's not there. But it's there. And we need to realize that in many ways we are near the 22nd and the 23rd hour.
Thank you, sir.
This moment of this evening brings us back to one of our own. Sir, Dr. Justice Ribeiro, as informative as this evening has been, it wouldn't be complete without you sharing your wisdom with us.
My colleagues, the President of the High Court Bar Association, my good friend Asmin Jinoy, and my colleagues at the bar, old and new. I am thankful to your president for inviting me today. It has been years since I have been away. I have come back on a few occasions, but sat on the bench, and from the chair back to the chamber and to my house. Not much contact with the bar at large. So I see faces over here which were not there during my days. Some young faces who practiced before me but now today are the leaders of the bar. And I'm happy to see a young, vibrant bar in Goa. I remember when I went to Bombay or for the matter Aurangabad and Nagpur, I used to always tell them that after the affiliate side, after the original side bar in Bombay, if we have a good bar, it is our Goa bar. They are prohibition practically in all matters. They are good, they study the matter, well briefed. Not somebody who comes to the court and says, "Sir, please pass an order. This is for my stomach." These are the kind of arguments sometimes you hear in some of the. But I hope you all keep it up, and that in Nagpur, I sat down there in 1997, and there was advocates were arguing the matter provincially and well. I went back in 2005, of course, this time I was sitting on the division bench, and I found there was a backward rule. Instead of the bar advancing, it had come down. And in my address to the bar, I did mention, of course, they were not happy. But I said, we must learn the truth. And the problem was too many lawyers coming, no seniors to help them, and therefore unguided poor people just out of law colleges. And in law colleges, no professors to teach them except the Jabwalas. I don't know what is the correct term. So having said that, I will not take much of your time because I know it has been a long and tiring meeting, but I will feel a few words of my part. I do not know how many of you in college, or for the matter, once you became lawyers, ever read the preamble to the Constitution of India. Most of us, I think, never read the preamble. But if you see the preamble, it encompasses the idea of India. It encompasses the concept of justice, social, economic, political, liberty of thought, action, faith and belief, and equality of status. So in the one preamble which was voted today on 26 November 1949, 26 November 1949, India gave to itself an idea, a broad-based idea of what the nation must move forward to. As I stand today, I look at the functioning of one of the most important pillars in the Constitution, the judiciary. And I will make a few points as my job for today. In the beginning of the Constitution, when the Constitution was evolving and developing, there were a lot of anarchy caused by the partition, caused by communist insurrections. And the question was, how does the Constitution move forward? Does the man who breaks the law be incarcerated under the preventive detention laws, or does he have a right? And I quote to you from the judgment of Justice Vivian Bose, one of our great judges. In the judgment in Krishna, it is not reported in AIRSC. You find it in the SCR. I found it while doing research on freedom of speech. And this is what Justice Vivian Bose had to say. It is perhaps ironical that I should struggle to uphold the freedom in favor of a class of persons who, if rumor is to be accredited, and the list of their activities furnished to us is true, would be the first to destroy them if they had got the power. But he says that is not our role. Our role is to protect the Constitution. So therefore, in the first formative years of the Constitution, the courts were guiding and leading the Constitution so that freedom becomes effective, trade and commerce becomes effective, and our courts played a stellar role in this development. Then came the second phase of the Constitution, when the very concepts of India were being attacked, judges were being transferred, things were being done by, of course, by the political party in power, and the court developed the concept of the basic feature of the Constitution in Keshavananda Bharati and thereafter reflected in Minerva Mills. Now this concept, we assume, has built us and given to us a Constitution in which the preambular concepts would be protected. But as my good friend Aski has said, it's not a Constitution. The preambular concept, it is the minds of the people and what is in their mind that will ultimately we think about. Of course, in the 70s again came the time when we had, I always said so, of course I said so in a speech when I was a secretary or a student, or no, a lawyer. We had a conference in Goa and Justice Chandrachud was there. And I did say the ADM Jabulpur judgment is something that to any right-thinking lawyer, to any right-thinking citizen, is a black mark on the judicial research. But except for the dissenting judgment of Justice H.R. Khanna, which shines and has been reflected thereafter. Then we have come into the third phase, where the laws, the courts advanced the laws on the right to life. Article 21 saw a new dimension. Article 21 was no longer rooted only in the pages of the Constitution. It broadened out. We looked at international covenants. We looked at the directive principles which were unenforceable. But then the courts developed this theory that they can be read into the fundamental rights. And so Article 21 in the fields of environment, in the field of ecology, in the field of women's rights, in the field of child rights, saw this evolution by the courts of Article 21 over a period of time from the 80s onwards. Justice Bhagwati developed the concept of the PIL petition. The PIL petition was developed to help those who could not reach the courts. Of course, today it has attained a view which is sometimes totally different. We have difference of opinion upon it. Some use, and some are using it as a means to control governments. So therefore, the evolution has taken place and the law has developed. But there is one consideration that we have to think. Though our laws provide for a democratic society, and I wish the Supreme Court some point of time would enter into this arena, because in the doctrine of separation of powers, the Speaker is supposed to be exercising his own powers. But right from the judgment of Sheriff of Middlesex and thereafter we come to the UP judgment and subsequent judgments, courts have interfered with the decision of speakers. My only hope is that some point of time, the Supreme Court also will put a timeline on speakers to decide the issue on defection. Because that defeats the very concept of the idea of democracy. If you are elected on the part of one party, you defect and the matters kept pending for a long time. I'm sorry that some of my judges will be there, taking matters before them, not because for you. I'm speaking on the larger, broader issue. I myself was a part of the system, and I always felt so. So this evolution, I think, is required, and with that, I think there is some further part of the function still remaining, and it is Goa. It's a Friday evening, and I do not want to keep you up on what you want to do. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. 21st century is an age of information. We in the committee, led by our president, thought it was time to bring the association into this age of information, to build an online presence for the association. To this end, we have worked to put together a website that will give both information about the association and latest updates that are of relevance to the members, and an e-magazine. And what better day to launch the website than the 26th of November, Constitution Day. May I request our senior judge, Justice Revati Moite Dere, to do us the honor of launching our website.